This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. Today's guest is Caroline Prijatel-Sutton, who is a psychologist and the executive director of the Coalition for Family Harmony, a nonprofit here in Ventura County. Hi, Caroline. So happy to have you here today to talk about domestic violence and what your organization does to alleviate the pain of a family in distress. Let's start off by acquainting our listener with what the Coalition is all about and what it does for the residents of Ventura County.
Thank you for having me, Kathleen. I'm happy to be here.
Yes.
We are a nonprofit, like you said, and we have been in existence for over 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And we actually celebrated our 40th anniversary last year.
Uh-huh.
And we are dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in Ventura County. So we provide a host of programs that are holistic. We start with the crisis and work through all the way through prevention and intervention programs.
Wow.
We have a 30-day shelter that helps victims transition from a violent situation into safety.
Uh-huh.
We have transitional housing. We have a rape crisis program. We're the only rape crisis center in Ventura County.
Wow.
We have wonderful counseling programs, parenting classes, and a great education program in the schools for teenagers as well.
Oh, that's inspiring work. So you used to be known as a Coalition for Domestic Violence. Why did you change the name?
We changed the name as we wanted to look towards the positive. We find a lot of strengths in the individuals and families that we work with. And whatever family means to someone who is a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence, we want to work with them. We feel their support system is very important. So whether we're working with an individual, we're working with a family, we want to work towards that family harmony. And many of our programs are surrounded by that. So we actually have a program within the agency called Family Harmony that works on parenting skills, that works on couples counseling.
Uh-huh.
And so these are important, whatever a family is made up of having that support system for them.
Right. Well, let's back up a moment. The Coalition is a nonprofit. What does that mean exactly? And how do residents benefit from nonprofits in our community?
A nonprofit is an organization that does not make a profit off of its funding. So this can be very beneficial to community members because they're receiving wonderful care and they're receiving it at a low cost to no cost, which is a lot more affordable. It usually are community-based organizations, so they're in communities that are easy to access and need the help. And it allows people to have a constant way of finding help, of low cost and affordable help, and also quality help as well.
That's really important, to have the low or no cost.
Absolutely,
because,
absolutely.
I imagine many people wouldn't be able to afford it.
No, correct.
Yeah.
A lot of the help that they receive are from marriage and family therapists, which we know can be very pricey. And the way we are able to utilize our funding allows us to have therapists that come in and work with them often for no cost at all.
Oh, wow.
So they're getting quality help. They're getting trained therapists, and they're able to move from a crisis into stability in their life.
Now, are these therapists volunteers in your organization?
Many of them are volunteers.
Uh-huh.
They're interns and trainees, so they are finishing up their coursework or they have finished it up and they're moving towards licensure as a marriage and family therapist. And they are under supervision of a licensed marriage and family therapist clinical supervisor.
Oh. So how did you personally get involved with the Coalition?
I began at the Coalition in 2007. And I was finishing up my intern hours as a psychologist. And I came to the Coalition as a coordinator of a program. And I became very inspired with not only saving lives, because that's what we do on a daily basis, is save victims from domestic violence and rape crisis situations, but also the work that we're doing in the community. We're really making a difference in the community. It starts with an individual and it progresses into the community. And I find that very inspiring. Being able to change lives on a daily basis, being able to talk to our community partners and community members and really come up with solutions towards ending domestic violence.
Yeah, you don't often think of domestic violence as actually ending in death.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have
Yeah.
known that it has. In
Yeah.
the past couple of years, we have seen that in our community.
Oh.
And, we have to start thinking about this as a more global issue than an individual issue.
Global meaning.
Global meaning it's no longer a private secret that is kept within a family. We can't sweep this under the rug. And we know that research has shown us that individuals who perpetrate domestic violence are more likely to cause harm in other ways. So whether it's shootings, we've seen that in recent media, as well as harming others. We know that domestic violence does not just touch one person.
Right.
It touches many.
So how did the coalition come into existence?
We began over 40 years ago, like I said, and it began as a very small grassroots effort. And it was a group of women in Ventura County that started the coalition. And one of those members, Roz McGrath, began it as well and started with very little funding to no funding and really wanted a place for women to be able to get help. There just weren't very many options for women who were in domestic violence situations to get help.
Yeah, and people will say, well, why don't they just leave? But that's not so easy.
It's not so easy at all. And that really hasn't changed. There's more options for domestic violence victims, but the idea that they can just leave and everything will be fine is sort of an antiquated idea.
Right.
And one that can be very dangerous as well. So we know that leaving is difficult. There's financial reasons. There's relationship reasons. Children may be in the picture, and it's dangerous to leave as well. It can be very dangerous. So they wanted to start an organization that would help women at least be able to talk about it. And it really formed from there into a large nonprofit that is able to help thousands of families and women and men and children every year.
Wow, that's quite a few. So where do you get your funding?
We receive our funding from local, state, county, as well as federal funding as well. And other funding comes from resources such as fundraisers and unrestricted funding as well, maybe small grants and donations as well. We look for those in our community. So most of our programmatic funding comes from those larger state and federal grants.
So what's your relationship with the Battered Women's Thrift Shop?
The Thrift Shop is a organization that helps the coalition because they give us a percentage of any funds they receive. It's a large thrift shop. It's in Ventura. I advise everyone to go there. It's a great thrift store. And it gives us a percentage every month and helps us sustain our agency.
Okay. How many employees do you have at the coalition?
We currently have 70 employees.
70?
Yes, 70, 70.
Impressed.
And we've grown quite a bit from those beginning stages. And majority of those are part-time and full-time employees. We also have volunteers. And those volunteers help us do outreach in the community. They may sit on our board of directors. We're always looking for candidates for our board. They help us around the office, doing administrative work as well. So a good mix of paid employees and volunteers.
Do some of your employees have degrees like in social work or counseling?
Absolutely. Many of our employees have degrees in marriage and family therapy, also counseling, social work, any sort of social justice oriented degree, sociology. So many of our staff come with a background of wanting to help, of being helpers.
So what is the demographic for domestic violence?
There really is not a demographic for domestic violence. Domestic violence can happen to anyone. And we always want to make sure that others are aware of that because it doesn't just hit someone of one socioeconomic status. It does not hit someone of a certain race or ethnicity or religion. This is a issue that hits all. And we want to make sure that people understand that no matter where they come from, 1 in 4 women are touched by domestic violence.
1 in 4.
1 in 4. Mm-hmm. So if you look around at your friends, your family, and you count out that number, you're going to know someone who has been affected by domestic violence.
And may not be saying
anything. Correct.
So this is interesting because we have sort of an urban myth, that it's women or lower socioeconomic classes that experience violence. Now you just gave me a percentage, 1 in 4. So are women disproportionately represented in this group? Are there more women than men?
There are more women. Men tend to be between 1 in 6 and 1 in 8.
Oh, that many.
Yes. However, we know that women report more often. Not enough, but more often than men. There seems to be a stigma anyway with domestic violence. We know that. There's a lot of shame regarding domestic violence, embarrassment. It was my fault. So taking their own accountability. I need to work on things myself. It was my doing. But we know that with men, it can be very shameful because there's a stigma that men are supposed to be able to stand up for themselves, that they are supposed to be stronger physically and mentally. And we know that this just is a stigma and this is a myth. And that men, too, can be victims of domestic violence and rape. And they have a more difficult time being able to report that. They could be embarrassed to call law enforcement. They could be embarrassed to call their friends.
Right.
So the reporting is a little bit off. But we do know that more numbers come from females.
Do you have any statistics on how many people in Ventura County experience domestic violence?
Currently, Ventura County is one of the highest per capita cities in the state of California for domestic violence.
Wow.
So we know that our numbers are very high, and we don't really have a reason for it. In our shelter alone, we see over 60 individuals a year. And we see over about 1,500 in our agency that come through for domestic violence counseling. But this statistic of Ventura County having the highest proportion of domestic violence rates per capita in California is staggering. And it's been a couple of years as well.
So do you think maybe there's more reporting of the violence here? Is that
Yes, there could be more reporting. We definitely hope that that's the case, that people are more educated about the resources and that there is more reporting. But we also know that domestic violence on a whole across the nation has increased. And there really are no concrete reasons why that has happened.
That's very interesting. So what are some of the consequences of domestic abuse? And does this abuse ever get better over time?
Well, there are many consequences of domestic violence. As I said before, it doesn't just touch one person. So the individual who is the victim of the abuse can have years of mental health issues, PTSD, having to deal with on a daily basis, having their body invaded like that. And whether it was verbal abuse, whether it was financial abuse, whether it was physical abuse, they all hurt. And many times, if someone has not been physically abused, someone may not see that as domestic violence, but those bruises fade, the scars may fade, but that abuse, that verbal abuse, really can have a harmful effect. It's demeaning, the put downs, the you're not worth it, no one wants you, the isolation, all of that can have a very terrible effect on somebody. And it affects the children and it affects the household. And so there are many effects of domestic violence that cross the span of who is involved. Most often, perpetrators want to keep the victim isolated. They want to keep them away from friends and family because then they have control over them. And that's sort of the cycle of violence that we like to educate on. And it can affect the children as well. Whether they were involved in the abuse, children know what's going on.
Right.
And they know when parents are fighting and when it escalates to abuse. And it can really, really harm children developmentally.
Oh, I can understand that. I imagine, it's involved with, special ed kids or learning disabilities.
Absolutely. And there's research that even shows that in utero, children have developmental issues when they're born because of domestic violence.
Because of the actual physical
because
blows?
Because of the actual
or
physical, the stress on the mother.
Right.
Many times the mother may not be taking care of herself or eating well, and just has a general high level of stress.
Right.
But the abuse most often does not get better over time. And that's something we have to educate everybody on. That we have those honeymoon phases where flowers are given, vacations are given, jewelry is given. I'm so sorry, this will never happen again. But we know that if someone is going to abuse once, they're going to do it again. And we want people to seek help.
Let's just leave that right here while we do a station ID. This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. Today's guest is Caroline Prijatel-Sutton, who is a psychologist and the executive director of the Coalition for Family Harmony, a nonprofit in Ventura County which assists families suffering from domestic violence. Okay, so we're back. So you were talking about, the great impact that domestic violence can have. It's pretty far-reaching.
It is, absolutely. It doesn't just reach the individual. It reaches family members, community members. It really spreads out.
So, you mentioned a type of abuse I had never heard of or thought of, financial abuse. What does that look like?
Financial abuse is an abuse of literally someone's finances. So many times a perpetrator of domestic violence, one way of controlling the victim is to take away their source of funds. Literally take
like
away
checking
accounts,
credit
cards. Maybe they'll max out their credit cards so that they hurt their credit score. Maybe they will take their money from their checking account. Maybe they will close their credit cards so they don't have access to resources that will allow them to escape.
Wow.
So when someone doesn't have access to money, credit cards, they don't have a means of finding safety, or they feel that they don't.
Right. And this is where you can step in.
This is where we can step in. So many times someone will say, I don't have any money. They don't need money to come to us.
Oh,
everything is taken care of in our shelter, their food, their clothing if they need it, and they don't have to worry, and we will help them on the path to regain some of those finances, learn how to balance a checkbook, get a checking account back. But financial abuse is a very manipulative and tricky type of domestic violence.
It's not straightforward.
It's not straightforward
punching.
By any means. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it could be that the perpetrator is garnishing the victim's wages or taking their paycheck when they get home. And it really leaves that victim in a vulnerable state, not being able to help themselves if they need to.
Right.
They lose that control.
Yeah, because you need money to survive in the world.
Right.
So why do abusers abuse? What is their motivation?
Most often the motivation is a controlling one. And we know that abusers don't out of the blue abuse. We call it a family cycle or a generational cycle of violence, where somewhere along the way they have learned that abusing someone, hurting someone, domestic violence is a way to build a relationship, as a way of controlling somebody. And what we teach in schools and in the public is that this is not a healthy way to have a relationship or be in one, and can be lethal, as we know. So most often perpetrators have a hard time with accountability. They may have mental health issues themselves. They may not. They may have substance abuse issues themselves. They may not. But oftentimes they are in some sort of state themselves where they feel insecure that they need to abuse someone, and somehow that makes them feel in control and better about themselves.
So it gives them power. When
Yes,
they
it gives
feel
them power. They are in power. They have power. They are in control. Yes.
So is power what is the motivation behind sexual assault?
It is. Many people think that it is because someone wants to have sex, and usually that's not the case. There is also a power type of issue there as well. That when a rape occurs, the perpetrator, the one that acted out with the violence, wants to have control over somebody in a sexual way.
So are victims sometimes not aware that they're being abused?
Absolutely. We see many victims who were not aware that they were being controlled. When we talk to teenagers, we find that many teenagers think that some of the controlling aspects, such as texting 100 times a day, or checking on your Facebook feed, or checking your voicemails, is cute. It's flirtatious. But what we want to do is we want to delineate what is flirting and what are red flags. And those are the red flags of the constant checking on where you are, maybe grabbing your arm a little bit too tightly, checking your Facebook constantly, opening your mail, checking your messages, or wondering where you are constantly. These are all sort of those pathways to maybe a more severe type of abuse in the future. And so many times people don't know that they're being abused, even if they are being hit, even if they are being told that they're not worth it. They may not understand that that is not the way a relationship should be.
Oh, so maybe their past, the same thing happened in their family of origin, so they think it's normal.
Correct. They saw their aunts, their uncles, their mothers, their fathers do the same thing and be in the same position, and that's normalizing for them.
So where do you get most of your referrals?
We receive many referrals from law enforcement. We receive them from social services as well. We do have many people that come in who self-refer as well. They're ready to leave. They're ready to find counseling. They need that help, and so they're making that step. And we receive them from neighbors, family members, schools as well, and also county agencies such as the district attorney's office or probation.
Oh, okay. Do some people self-refer?
Absolutely. We do have people that call our bilingual hotline and will self-refer. They're in a place where they're ready to leave. And we have people who are not quite ready to leave, but they want to start talking about a safety plan for that day when they are.
Okay, so at this point, and as a public service, we can have you give that hotline number.
Absolutely.
Do you want to
Sure. It's a 1-800 number. It's 1-800-300-2181.
Okay, that's 1-800-300-2181. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the amazing program you have at the shelter. Now, how long can an abused person stay at the shelter?
We have availability for individuals and families to stay for 30 days. And it is a regular house on a regular street. It's in a confidential location, but you would never know that it is a shelter. And it really helps someone come in, find safety right away, and begin their life over again.
So why is it so important to have an undisclosed location?
Well, we keep our shelter confidential, as we want to ensure that those who are there, our clients, the victims, and also our staff are safe. When you do give out the information on where a shelter is, you're leaving yourself open to maybe the victim's perpetrator coming by trying to find them. And we want to ensure the safety for all of our clients.
Now, you told me a little bit ahead of time about the housing stipend available. Could you talk a little bit about that? That is just the most amazing program I've ever heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were grateful and lucky enough to receive a large grant from the California Office of Emergency Services last year, and it is specifically for transitional housing. So in Ventura County, there is a lack of housing for victims of domestic violence and a lack of housing overall. And this is specifically for victims of domestic violence to find alternate ways of housing and not returning to the perpetrator. So after someone leaves our shelter, or if they qualify, they are able to be screened and then, once approved, receive a monthly stipend that goes directly to their landlord and pays for their rent in full for a year.
Wow.
So this is a great chance for someone who may leave our shelter, doesn't know where they necessarily want to live, but no, they don't want to go back to the abuser. Maybe they don't have a strong support system, but they're really ready to make a change. They're going to look for consistent work. Then maybe they're going to go back to school, and they just really need that initial help in getting off the ground.
Right. Are there any eligibility requirements? I mean, do they have to cross a few hurdles?
A few hurdles, yes. And that's mostly just to make sure that they stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that they are not returning to the abuser, and that they're utilizing this rent money for the better. So they have to go through a little bit of an assessment, but we really want to make sure that our clients are secure, that we're giving them the help that they need. And it's very difficult to find safe housing after you leave the shelter. It's expensive.
You need a down payment.
You need a down payment. Sometimes you don't have furniture or kitchen accessories, pots, pans, utensils, and those are things that we can help out with.
Oh, wow. So what kind of success rate do you have with people on the rent program?
At this point, we have 100% success
Oh, my
rate.
goodness.
We're extremely excited about it. It's proven to be a great success. It really has enabled our clients to be able to move from the shelter or wherever they were at that point in time into safety and really grow. And that is what we want to see. They can still receive case management. They can still receive counseling at our agency. And that's what's moving them from that crisis to safety.
It sounds like a bargain when you think about and as you talked about the impact that domestic violence can have on a society.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we're 30 days is not a long time to regain your life. A month seems like a long time, but when you're in that type of crisis situation, you're coming into our shelter at all hours of the night. You don't have any belongings. Maybe you have children, maybe you don't, whether you're a man or a woman. We see everybody. And it is a difficult transition. And to leave in 30 days and have a place to go and have the money to do it is very difficult.
Yeah, I can see that. I understand, and you mentioned this earlier, that you help a victim create a safety plan for himself. Now, what kinds of things would be on this safety plan?
The safety plan is tailored towards the individual, but there are a few points that we definitely want to go over. So we want to make sure that someone has access to a way to leave, whether that's a car, or they're driving with a friend to a law enforcement agency or a safe location that we can pick them up, that they have access maybe to some money in some way. They have a small bag packed. If they have children, they know where to pick them up, that they have access to any sort of important records, bank account information, social security card, etc. So we want to make sure that they have sort of those ready, and also a way to actually get out. When is the perpetrator not going to be at home? When will they be at work perhaps or school? When can you get out safely? Because leaving can be very dangerous. It is probably one of the most dangerous times. If a perpetrator is going to see you leave, the abuser is going to see you leave, that can be one of the most almost fatal times in a domestic violence relationship. So leaving and having a plan is very important.
So losing their power over the person
Exactly.
is what happens.
Exactly.
Well, this has been so interesting, and I have more questions, but unfortunately, we're just about out of time. But I'd love to have you come back again and
I would love to.
Yeah, talk about this a little more.
I would love to. We have so many programs and love to talk about them all.
Okay. Today's guest has been Carolyn Prijatel-Sutton, who is a psychologist and executive director of the Coalition for Family Harmony. For more information on the Coalition, the listener can contact their main office, 805-983-6014.